Hi guys, welcome back to my channel. My name is Darcy Lynn, and today I'm going to be doing something a little bit, well, a lot different from my normal content. Excuse me. I've been writing a book, and about a week ago I posted a video to TikTok kind of sending out feelers on whether or not people would want to hear excerpts from my book. I got some pretty good feedback, and so I just decided to do it. So just a couple of things before we begin. This is really the first real draft of this book. I have most of it written like fully, but it's kind of all in notes and kind of bits and pieces. And this is the first part of the book that I've actually put together, and it's fairly polished in order to make it more accessible so I can read it to you guys, but it's nowhere near perfect. It needs a lot of work. I know this, so like if you listen to this and think, "Wow, she's a really bad writer," I'm not. I'm pretty good at writing. I've written my whole life, but this is just a very new version or new. This is just a very new draft. So there's that. And two, this book is a dark fantasy romance between a woman, me, Darcy Lynn. Her name is Darcy Lynn, and she's me. She was born without arms and legs. She's in a wheelchair. She's overweight. She's me. And the reason I decided to keep the main character as a woman in her 40s without arms and legs is because, as far as I know, there are no other books, especially uh, dark fantasy romances with spicy scenes that involve a woman in a wheelchair, especially a woman in a wheelchair with as many missing parts as I have. So I just thought I would, you know, so I decided to write about myself. The second person or my love interest in the book is Lucifer Morningstar, the angel, the fallen angel. Yes, that Lucifer. Um, but yeah, anyway, that's the setup. So also, I'm not obviously I'm not a voice actor. I don't read professionally, so I'm gonna do my best, but just keep that in mind also. All right, here we go. Lucifer walks down the wide hallway with Azazel beside him, their footsteps echoing through the theology building as they head for the exit. Passing an open classroom door, something inside him catches and pulls tight, stopping him mid-step. Azazel glances back, but Lucifer offers no explanation. He has none to give. My voice echoes from the front of the room, sharp and certain, as I lecture. Without understanding why, Lucifer steps inside and takes a place against the back wall. He doesn't interrupt or approach. He simply watches me, silver eyes fixed and unreadable, as though every word I say matters. Before we start, I say, maneuvering my wheelchair to the front of the lecture hall, I want to establish one rule. You don't have to agree with me or even with each other. The goal of this class is understanding, not winning. A few students visibly relax. One closes a laptop, who is clearly prepared for theological warfare. This class, we're discussing the cultural significance of the Luciferian archetype. Notice I said archetype. We're not discussing his deity, not discussing the devil or the historical figure, or even exceptionally attractive nightclub owners with unresolved parental issues. The room laughs. Modern culture looked at thousands of years of religious fear, philosophical rebellion, and literary tragedy and asked, what if he solved murders in Los Angeles and had excellent cheekbones? I gesture toward the screen where medieval artwork, Milton, Blake, comic books, and Tom Ellis share space in a timeline so questionable it's almost absurd. To some, Lucifer represents rebellion against divine authority. To others, pride. In literature, he becomes the exile, the dissenter, the outsider. Modern television apparently decided he needed therapy and an equally attractive female detective partner. More laughter. Here's the thing. Every version tells us something about the culture that created it. Medieval Europe feared heresy. Romantic writers admired rebellion. Modern audiences are more concerned with trauma, redemption, and whether the devil can maintain a healthy relationship. A student raises his hand. So if every culture keeps rewriting him, how do we know which version of Lucifer is the real one? I point to him. Exactly. You've just stumbled into the argument we're going to spend this entire class untangling. Maybe asking which version is real is the wrong place to start. I'm less interested in deciding which portrayal of Lucifer is the most accurate than in understanding why each culture portrays him the way it does. Sometimes he's a monster, sometimes a revolutionary, sometimes a tragic figure. Those changes tell us more about the people telling the story than about Lucifer himself. So the better question is, what do people need him to be? Another hand rises. So what do we need him to be today? Well, that depends on who we are, I say. To someone who values obedience, Lucifer can represent treason. To someone suspicious of authority, resistance. To an artist, defiance. To a psychologist, separation from authority and the formation of an independent identity. We don't all need Lucifer to be the same thing, and that's exactly why he survives as an archetype. If he were simply evil or simply good, there wouldn't be much left to argue about. I advance the slide. And none of this is new. People have been reshaping Lucifer to fit their needs for thousands of years. Most people will tell you that he fell because of pride. That's the dominant interpretation. But the history is considerably messier. Take the serpent in Genesis. Later traditions turned him into the tempter who pulled humanity away from God. But the serpent is never explicitly identified as Lucifer anywhere in Genesis, anywhere in the Bible. Over time, theology, folklore, translation, and politics wove separate figures and passages together until the serpent became Lucifer in the popular imagination. In other words, people transformed him into what they needed him to be. A few students begin to look uncomfortable. Probably the ones raised believing Lucifer is nothing but the evil serpent, still trying to corrupt everything and everyone. Think of it like separating layers of paint from an old wall. Every generation added another coat, sometimes just covering what came before, and sometimes changing the image entirely. Our job is to figure out which layer came from where and why it was added. I let that settle. And acknowledging an idea that differs from what you believe doesn't require accepting it. Understanding is not endorsement. Some of you believe Lucifer is a literal being, either the source of all evil or a figure capable of redemption. Others see him as a literary or theological construct. Both perspectives are welcome here as long as you can support your viewpoint and treat each other like adults. In this class, belief is something we examine, not something we use as evidence. For next week, be prepared to argue for an interpretation of Lucifer you disagree with and explain it as fairly as possible. If the people who hold that view wouldn't recognize themselves in your argument, you built a straw man and set it on fire, which is thematically appropriate but academically worthless. I scan the room, and no, the TV series alone won't carry your final paper. If your bibliography is just Netflix and fanfic, I will notice. A student in the second row slowly lowers her phone. The room erupts into conversation before I've even dismissed them. I smile. That's always my favorite part. Lucifer remains in the shadows, arms crossed, his frame nearly filling the doorway he leans against. Students filter out, buzzing about their assignment, and none of them glance up. If they did, they'd see something that doesn't belong in this building. Something too tall, too still, too ancient to pass for faculty. He waits until the room empties, until the last voice fades down the hall, before pushing off the wall. When he steps forward, Azazel swears under his breath, but stays put at the back of the room. Lucifer's footsteps are deliberate and heavy. He stops at the edge of the raised platform where I sit, my back turned toward him. The scent of lilacs reaches him before he's close enough to touch me, delicate and stubborn against the antiseptic air of the lecture hall. He doesn't smile. He didn't find my jokes about the TV show particularly funny. He doesn't laugh at the idea of the devil needing therapy, though the irony is thick enough to choke on. He just looks at me with an expression that gives nothing away, silver eyes pinning me to the spot. That's quite the talent, turning eons of suffering into a syllabus, he says, his voice low, carrying easily through the empty room. He glances at the screen where his face, or someone's idea of it, is frozen in digital pixels. Trauma, redemption, healthy relationships. He says the words like they taste of ash. You make it sound so tidy, as if the fall was just a footnote for character development. I shake my head, not turning around as I speak. It's not tidy, it's complicated and messy. The history of Lucifer is heartbreaking. Were you looking for extra help with the topic? Because I'm always happy to help any of my students. I turn and nearly drop my iPad. The word dies in my throat as I finally get a good look at him. You're not a student. My eyes drag slowly down his body, and I think, God, at least I hope not, because holy fuck, he's sexy. And for some reason, very, very angry. I shake myself out of it before I say something wildly inappropriate. I force my attention back to his face. Can I help you? He watches me turn, watches the realization hit me, and then he hears the thought, loud as a shout in this quiet room that slips through my defenses. Something sharp tugs at the corner of his mouth. Not quite amusement. No, he says, the word a low rumble in his chest. I'm not a student. He steps closer, closing the distance until he's looming over my wheelchair. He doesn't touch me, but he fills the space, blocking out the light from the room. The iPad rattles in my bag. My eyes drag over him, obviously attracted, but he doesn't acknowledge it. I'm not looking for tutoring, Professor. He uses the title deliberately, letting it hang there between us. He glances down at my right side at the 7-inch stump, then back to my face. No pity, no hesitation, just looking. I heard your lecture. You discussed the Luciferian archetype with the confidence of someone who's never met the reality. He leans down, bracing a hand on the desk beside me, bringing his face closer to mine. The scent of lilacs grows stronger, drowning out everything else. You talk about rebellion like it's a theme for a paper. Exile like it's a narrative device. His voice drops, quieter now, almost intimate. Tell me, do you teach them about the cost? Or do you skip that part where the hero doesn't get a redemption arc? I narrow my eyes and think, why are the sexy ones always the biggest asshats? Or maybe I discuss the Luciferian archetype with the confidence of someone who knows exactly what the fuck she's talking about. I angle my chair toward you, irritation sharpening into anger. I don't skip the cost. That's the entire point. You can't teach Lucifer's rebellion without talking about what it cost him, what it cost humanity, and what people have spent centuries turning suffering into. My eyes narrow, and I never called him a hero. Lucifer isn't the ultimate villain, but he's not some spotless revolutionary either. He saw humanity becoming another collection of Yahweh's obedient little toys and just said no. That choice had consequences. He studies me for a beat, I study him for a beat, then something clicks. You're one of them, aren't you? One of the tenured professors who tried to block the department from hiring me. At the back of the room, Azazel remains perfectly still, but a sharp pulse of amusement rolls off him. He's trying very hard not to smile. So let me save us both the time. I was hired, and I'm going to teach the material as history, theology, and math and myth demand, not according to whichever version makes the faithful more comfortable. And if your problem is that I think Lucifer deserves to be understood before he's condemned, go pray to your coward, narcissistic thunder and war god about it and leave me the hell alone. My outburst hangs in the air, and for the first time in a long time, Lucifer feels something like genuine surprise. It isn't the insult, he's heard far worse from beings with far more power, but the accuracy of my defense. I think I'm tearing into a colleague who is a narrow-minded believer. All to defend a figure I claim is just a story. He straightens, the tension in his shoulders easing slightly, and glances past me to where Azazel stands. The bastard is practically vibrating with suppressed laughter. Lucifer shoots him a look that promises retribution later. Azazel doesn't even flinch. Tenured. Lucifer repeats the word, tasting the absurdity of it. When he looks back at me, the coldness is cracked just enough to let the irony bleed through. If I were on the faculty, I wouldn't be arguing with you in an empty classroom. I'd have torched the syllabus before you even opened your mouth. He leans in again, but this time it isn't to threaten, it's to study me, searching for the source of my fire. You talk about the Morning Star with a lot of passion for someone who insists he's only a literary device. His voice is softer now, almost curious. You call God a coward, yet you won't let the devil be a hero. He pauses, letting that settle between us. Strange way to pick sides, Professor. You defend the rebellion, but despise the rebel. I slide a copy of the syllabus across the desk toward him. Here, go ahead, burn it. The last witches were burned less than 300 years ago for having the nerve to say the things I plan to say in this class, so I figure I'm getting off easy. But go for it. Burn the syllabus. Try to get me fired. Do whatever you think will make your Sky Daddy proud. I pause. Here's the thing, though. You can't burn everything and everyone who searches for the truth. If you could, you wouldn't be in my face right now. Lucifer pauses, his expression shifting as something in my words catches beneath his anger. And I never said I despised the rebel. I said he isn't a hero. Not because what he did was insignificant, but because he doesn't see himself as one. He gave us freedom, choice, free will, and we've taken those gifts and we twisted them into new ways to destroy ourselves again and again. He probably agrees with Heaven's opinion of him more than anyone realizes. He sees himself as the villain. I hold his gaze, my voice goes quieter, but just as certain. And he doesn't need a redemption arc because there's nothing to be redeemed for. He did what was right. The air in the room goes still. The HVAC hum fading into nothing. The mention of witches burning hits him like a physical blow. A sudden, sickening recall of heat and screaming and the smell of charred flesh that no amount of centuries scrubs out. His hand tightens on the edge of the desk, knuckles going white, and for a second, the veneer of the bored academic cracks completely as he thinks. She knows. Not my name, not my face, but she knows the shape of the wound. Witch burnings. She throws that around like a historical footnote, not realizing she's standing in the ash of a life I couldn't save. And the rest of it, giving freedom, watching humanity destroy itself, seeing himself as the villain. Who the hell is this woman? He stares at me, really looks at me, past the anger and the wheelchair and the defiance. I'm sitting there preaching about his sins to his face, not realizing I'm offering absolution. I don't need to burn your syllabus, he says, voice quiet and stripped of its earlier sarcasm. He reaches out, his hand large enough to crush the paper easily, but he only rests his fingertips against the stack of pages. You've already built a monument to tragedy and called it a degree. He pulls his hand back. You're arrogant, Professor. You sit there claiming to understand the mind of a being you think is a myth. You think you can comprehend the burden of watching humanity fail over and over? He lets out a short, humorless breath. He doesn't see himself as a villain because he's humble. He sees it because he's right. He turns slightly, breaking eye contact to look at the whiteboard behind me, covered in my handwriting. Nothing to be redeemed for, he repeats as if testing the weight of the words. When he turns back to me, the coldness in his eyes has thawed into something more volatile, something that burns hotter than ice ever could. You might be the only person on this campus who believes that, and yet you're willing to fail students for getting it wrong. A flicker of dark amusement crosses his face. I almost respect the cruelty of it. I look at him. There is no way of thinking. I meant what I said. They're free to argue whatever they please as long as it's their own mind doing the arguing. What I'm not saying is that while there's no way of thinking about the archetype of Lucifer, there's no wrong way of thinking about the archetype of Lucifer, painting him as a villain of humanity is wrong. I just won't fail anybody for thinking differently, simply because the version of Lucifer, that version of Lucifer, has been hammered into our heads for thousands of years. Of course, most people are still going to hold on to that. He raises an eyebrow, the movement subtle but pointed. He glances from me to the stack of papers and back again, letting the silence stretch just long enough to make me wonder if he's about to critique my entire teaching philosophy. Original thought, he repeats, testing the phrase like it's a foreign concept. In a university, that's a rare commodity. He crosses his arms again, the leather of his jacket creaking softly. The anger that flared earlier has cooled into something closer to curiosity, though his expression stays guarded. So, if one of them writes a paper claiming Lucifer was right to rebel because heaven's dictatorship built... So if one of them writes a paper claiming Lucifer was right Oh my goodness. So if one of them writes a paper claiming Lucifer was right to rebel against heaven's dictatorship built on fear, you'd pass them, even if heaven called him a monster for doing it. He tilts his head, studying my face. You're grading them on how well they think, not whether you agree with them. He goes quiet, thinking, I should hate this. It's messy, it's chaotic. Letting them believe whatever they say they want is exactly why humanity is such a disaster. But she isn't asking them to obey, she's asking them to choose. It's maddening and fascinating. It's a dangerous game, he says, his voice dropping. You're teaching them to question authority. Authority doesn't usually appreciate that. He glances toward the back of the room where Azazel is still loitering, then shifts his focus back to me. You're either very brave or very stupid. I haven't decided which. I watch him move from demeaning to angry to almost curious. Goddess, keeping up with his emotions is exhausting, I think. Then I sigh, some of the fight draining out of me. Not because he'd made a good point, but because I'm suddenly very tired of having the same conversation with different people who share the same narrow viewpoint. Since that's what I argued in my dissertation, I'm not likely to fail one of my students for arguing the same thing. But I won't fail the student who argues the opposite either. I'll present different perspectives and back them up with solid academic sources, but in the end, this isn't about forcing anyone to believe what I believe just because I'm the professor. I lean back slightly in my chair, holding his gaze. It's about getting them to think. If their thought process leads them to conclude that Yahweh is the good guy, fine. That's their conclusion to reach. Silently, I think it's the wrong conclusion, but I won't force anyone to see that. I then say, hopefully though, by challenging those assumptions, they'll be less likely to walk into a woman's classroom and accuse her of being stupid. The last sentence comes out pointed, with enough edge to make it clear exactly who I'm talking about. Lucifer lets the silence hang for a beat after my pointed remark, the corner of his mouth twitching in what might almost be a concession. He uncrosses his arms, letting them hang at his sides. Fair point, he says, the words grudging but genuine. But I didn't call you stupid. I offered you a binary choice. He pushes off the desk and takes a low circuit around my chair, not touching me, but moving like he owns the space. He stops on my other side, looking down at the stack of papers again. You wrote your dissertation on it, he says. You spent years defending the devil in the highest academic circles. That stopped being an academic interest a long time ago, Darcy Lynn. You built your life around this. He uses my first name for the first time, and it sounds strange coming from him, familiar in a way that he hasn't earned yet. He glances at Azazel over my head and jerks his chin toward the door. Azazel gets the message and slips out, closing it softly behind him. Now it's just the two of us in the empty classroom. You're tired, Lucifer observes, the earlier aggression gone, replaced by something harder to pin down. You're tired of explaining yourself to people who only see the surface. He crouches down then, bringing himself to eye level with me, resting his forearms on his knees. It's a submissive pose in geometry, but the look in his eyes is anything but. Tell me, does defending the monster make you feel safer, or does it just make you more of a target? I watch his friend leave with a slight jerk of his head, the command so subtle most people would miss it. I don't. The air tightens as he begins to circle, each step scraping against my nerves. My heart stutters, then races, a frantic drumbeat in my ears as he moves around me with deliberate patience. What is he doing? Stalking me? That's what it feels like. Something ancient and instinctual waking up, like I've been marked. A predator circling prey, testing the boundaries before the strike. I tell myself that's why my pulse is climbing, why my breath catches, why every nerve feels stretched thin. It's just instinct, the natural reaction of being watched like prey. He crouches down in front of me again. He crouches down in front of me, close enough that I can feel the heat radiating off him, and I'm fairly certain I'm supposed to be afraid. The moment hangs there, taut. Yet somehow I can't quite get there. Instead of fear, there's curiosity, defiance, something dangerously close to want. I am tired, but fighting to see Lucifer clearly is worth it. Because that's the one thing people miss. Because that's the one thing people miss in this whole theological mess. They see the demon, the angel, the serpent. A smile slips out despite myself, small but stubborn, like a flicker of flame refusing to be snuffed out. An emotionally confused piano bar owner / detective with an English accent. But I'm trying to see him, just Lucifer. I've been trying for 30 years. The smile fades as I hold his gaze. So yes, I'm tired. And it doesn't make me feel safer. My voice lowers, steadier than I feel, edged with something brittle. Because people, especially women who get too loud about certain subjects, always end up getting burned. Lucifer holds my gaze, the air between us growing thinner, harder to breathe as the silence stretches. He watches the pulse flutter in my throat, sees the way my breath catches. He knows exactly what that look in my eyes means. It's the look prey gives a predator, not when she's about to run, but when she realizes running won't help. Except underneath it, there's want, desire. 30 years, he repeats, the words rumbling deep in his chest. You were a child. He tilts his head, steadying the curve of my jaw, the stubborn set of my mouth. Most children play with dolls. You played with fire. Then he thinks, I don't know whether to be impressed or terrified. She's been chasing my ghost since she was 13, and the way she talks about burning, she knows. Not the history, but the feeling, the weight of it. You're right, he says, his voice dropping lower. Loud women have a nasty habit of becoming kindling. His eyes darken, the silver flashing with something old and volatile, a memory of heat and screaming that he can never quite escape. The world doesn't like being contradicted, Darcy Lynn. It sure as hell doesn't like being contradicted by a woman who refuses to apologize for existing. He shifts closer, bringing his face inches from mine, close enough to feel the warmth radiating from my skin, close enough to smell the lilacs and the faint, lingering scent of chalk dust. You say you've been trying to see him, he whispers. You've spent 3 decades staring at paintings and reading poetry, thinking you can find truth in ink and metaphor. He reaches out slowly, giving me time to pull away, and lets the back of one knuckle graze the soft skin of my cheek. A ghost of a touch. Did it ever occur to you that the real thing might be staring right back? I'm trembling. Only a little, but enough to annoy me. I don't let myself get googly-eyed over attractive men. Not anymore. I'm 43, not 21. Then his words snapped the tension wound tight against my chest, and I laughed. A genuine, thoroughly amused laugh. Oh yes, I'm sure Lucifer would be absolutely captivated by me. A 43-year-old, newly retired theologian with a body that's missing parts. I'm certain he'd find me utterly fascinating. I shake my head and turn toward the door, still chuckling as I disappear in the hallway. Once I'm gone, Azazel steps back into the room and watches the door close behind me before turning to Lucifer, with a deeply entertained expression. Care to explain what exactly you were doing there, Luke? He uses the alias they agreed upon whenever mortals might be listening. Lucifer remains crouched for a moment after I disappear in the hallway, the echo of my laugh and the scent of lilacs hanging in the air. Missing parts. The words taste sour like copper in his mouth. He straightens slowly, his joints protesting, and turns to face Lucifer. That amused expression makes him want to break something, preferably Azazel himself. Shut up, Azazel, he snaps, though there's no real heat behind it, just an irritation he can't quite pinpoint. He walks to the door I just exited, staring down the empty corridor as if he can still... He walks to the door I just exited, staring down the empty corridor as if he can still track the hum of my wheelchair motor. She's blind, he says quietly, almost to himself. Before turning back to his second in command, he adjusts his cuffs, smoothing out the leather jacket, trying to shake off the encounter. She looks in the mirror and sees a liability. I look at her and see. He trails off, jaw tightening. He sees resilience. He sees a woman who spent 30 years defending a monster because she believed it was the right thing to do. She dismissed me, he says, frowning as he looks back at Azazel. Laughed at the idea that the devil could want her. Lucifer lets out a short, sharp breath from his nose. I came here to see if she was a threat. Instead, I find the only person in this godforsaken city who actually gets it. And she thinks she's nothing. Azazel follows his gaze down the hallway, his expression sharpening with quiet amusement. You think that's why she's doing it? Defending you simply because she believes in everyone's right to be wrong? He glances back at Lucifer, studying his face with the ease of someone who's known him far too long. Are you certain she's the only blind one here? He pauses, letting the silence stretch before delivering the final blow. Because unless my ears have deceived me, which, as your second in command who knows you better than anyone, is impossible, you just admitted that you want a mortal woman. Something you haven't done since... The name hangs unspoken between them. Siobhan. But Azazel has enough sense not to say it out loud. The air in the room drops 10 degrees instantly. The unspoken name fills the space anyway, suffocating and familiar. Lucifer turns on Azazel slowly, a shift of weight more than a step, but the sheer mass of him blocks out the light from the hallway. Careful, he says, the words soft and utterly devoid of warmth. He doesn't raise his voice, he doesn't have to. He steps into Azazel's space, bringing them chest to chest, looking down at his nose at him. Do not finish that sentence, and do not presume to know what is or isn't happening in my head. He wants to break his jaw just for the implication. 1613 might as well be yesterday. Azazel knows better. He knows that name is a tripwire, and he damn near tripped it. I don't want her. Lucifer spits the word want like it's poison. I'm intrigued by the anomaly. A woman with no physical leverage who speaks with the authority of a general. That's it. He turns away from Azazel, pacing to the desk and gripping the edge until the wood groans under his fingers. She is a historian. She studies the past. I am the past. It's natural for her to be interested in the narrative. It's not personal. He's lying. He knows he's lying. Azazel knows he's lying. His thoughts circle back despite himself. The way she smelled, the defiance in her eyes when she called God a coward. It's been centuries since anybody looked at him and saw anything other than a weapon or a monster. She sees something else. She's not a threat, Lucifer says, though the words land with the finality of a sentence being passed. Not yet. His eyes flick toward the door, cold and unreadable. But she's loud, reckless, and far too interested in things that don't concern her. If she keeps digging, eventually she'll cross a line that she can't uncross. Mortals have burned for less. It's a lesson she needs to learn before it's too late. Azazel shakes his head as the two of them leave the classroom, but he keeps his thoughts to himself. To most people, what Lucifer just said would sound like a threat. Azazel knows better. He's known Lucifer since before the fall, stood beside him during the rebellion, followed him into hell, and has served as his second-in-command ever since. He recognizes the sign when he sees them. Lucifer's been thoroughly undone for the first time in 400 years, and only the second time in his entire existence. And that's it. That's all I have so far. Well, I mean, no, it's not, but it's all that I'm going to read so far. Anyway, yeah. So, hope you enjoyed, and if you did, wow, reading really wrecks your throat. If you did enjoy, please do leave a like and be sure to subscribe to my channel. I plan on doing this more often. I would like to continue reading from my book. And just I don't know if I'm going to even try to publish this. It's a story that I've had in my head, like, screaming at me to write about Lucifer since I was very little. So yeah, I just thought it was time, and I don't know if I'm going to publish it, but I am going to write it, and I would love to be able to continue to share this with you guys. But yeah, I hope you enjoyed, and I will see you next time.